Hello, my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds. I'm Rosebud Reads, and welcome to my book garden. Actually, welcome to my basement, but I made it work. There's flowers everywhere, and it works. You know what? It is what it is, but welcome all the same. This is a chill stream, if you couldn't tell from the intro. It is also part two of the White Cat's Divine Scratching Post. I wanted to get the order correct. Book 1. Okay, going back to it being a chill stream, what this means is that I will be talking to my lovely book garden, occasionally talking to myself, commenting on the book, and now and again I will look up something, either an image, if something is being described that I want a little clarification on, or sometimes just a word to make sure that I'm explaining it correctly, or just don't know it. Um, this is also a mature stream, which means it's 18 plus, so that could be because of violence, gore, sexy times, um, the occasional triggering thing, which this is Danmei, and Danmei does have such things. So if either of these things aren't to your flavor, excluding the triggering aspects, it's totally okay not to watch. Like, it for your mental health, if you need to leave, I get it. And it's okay. In regards to it being a chill stream and not really it being your thing, maybe stick around, see if you enjoy it, but if you don't, it's okay. But yes, hello Ember, hello Annika, hello little potate. How are you all doing today? I know I'm doing pretty good. Hello also Ruby. But yes, regarding the mature streams, usually I can kind of see when things are getting a little dark and might be coming up to something that is triggering. So if you are here during the live, there's only so much I can do, but if you are watching later, and I find that something occurred that potentially could be triggering, you will see a trigger warning in the title. There will be a slight simplified description of what happened in my description, and there will be timestamps of where it starts and where it ends in the video. So there will be a little bit more warning if you are watching this later, but there's always that possibility. If you think I missed something and should mark it as triggering later on, just leave me a comment. I believe it's super important and am willing to go back in and add timestamps where needed if things pop up. I just want everyone here to have a good time, a safe time, and enjoy. Oh no, you're still hobbling around thanks to the stubborn ankle, but otherwise doing well. Well, I hope it feels better soon, Annika. Oops, something just fell out of my pocket. What fell out of my pocket? Okay. Nothing important. Okay. But yeah. Okay, continuing on. I am not sponsored. I don't make anything from this. Maybe one day, but that is not anything that is probably going to be happening now or in the future, but you never know. It's a crazy world. If I do ever get sponsored, you all will be the first to know. But yes. I am also not fluent. This will probably show when I am attempting to say names and or places, but I've been getting better. But if I am viciously butchering a word, please just let me know and I'll fix it. Just be nice about it. But yes. Regarding not sponsored, the only thing I own is the physical copy over there and my time, and sometimes not even that. So, yeah. But I think that's about it. I do, as I usually do, have some things to show you all that have arrived over the weekend. I won't have as many things in the future because my Ally account is being temperamental, so I won't have as many cool things from there, but this will be the last round for a bit. I, as you all know, love ridiculous memes that pop up, and I actually found these plushies. So the cucumber shizen and the sausage bingha. I managed to find some keychains, and they're funny. But yes, if I had a nickel for every time I sprained my ankle taking out the trash, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot of nickels, but it's still enough. Yes. Um, I think I bought some pins a bit ago of these 2, and they're amazing. I love the ridiculous Danmei memes that crop up now and again. Um, but yeah. No, I think they're hilarious too. I also happened to pick up some basic Longshin pins. They're just little bunnies. Ta-da! I like that they're simplified. It's super cute. And then, last but not least, I did get some pens. They came in a set of 3. And shocker of all shockers, they're Modao Zushi. So we have Lamanji. We have Wei Wuxian. And we have Jiang Chang. Yep. But yeah. So this weekend I did end up going to the Ren Fair, and it was a lot of fun. I dressed up. I ended up falling down and kind of injuring my knee, but it's not that bad. Like it'll be better in like a week, hopefully. So that's all good. Gravity seemed very strong this week, so we all will have to be careful. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. I know it's a little earlier than we usually do. But yeah. If anyone else has things that they want to add, feel free to just post them in the book garden over there, and I'll get to them. For anyone who's new, I love it when people comment, share during the book. It makes it more fun. Feels like we're all in the same room together, which we kind of are. And it just makes the whole experience better. So yeah, feel free to just say hey or comment if you think something's funny. Because others probably think it's pretty funny too. All right. All right. So, we started our story last time and basically had kind of the Modao Zushi scene where Wei Wuxian dies at the very beginning. So our villain, Mo Tian Liao, dies at the beginning, detonating this gigantic death array, taking everyone with him except for his pet cat. He ends up basically merging with a spiritual tree and gaining a body, basically, from this tree, and kind of just stumbles in looking for a sect and finds he goes to the Wu Yun sect, which was, and he is about to be chosen for his looks, basically, when Shizen pops in. So, the cold, beautiful gaze of the Sanctum Master shifted ever so slightly to meet Mo Tianliao's eyes. The sect leader smiled at Qing Tong Zhenren. "Qing Tong, what brings you out of seclusion?" he asked in an exceedingly gentle tone. He might have sounded ingratiating if it hadn't been for his natural expression. So, Xuanji Zhenren almost imperceptibly shrank back. Yeah, beautiful cat-like Shizen, let's go! So, Qing Tong Zhenren then says, "I'll take him," in a clear, melodious voice that tinkled like the shattering of fine Mount Kunlun jade or the first cry of a baby phoenix. The sect leader nodded without any hesitation. No sooner had the words left his lips than a lustrous white jade token was tossed before Mo Tianliao. So he ended up receiving a personal disciple token, which surprised the sect leader. With this, Mo Tianliao could access most of the areas in Wuqing Sanctum. Even the usually expressionless Xuanji Zhenren's eyes widen. Such things were not given lightly. Even his newly recruited Heaven Attribute disciple wouldn't get one until he underwent a trial period. Hello, Truffle. How you doing? We literally are just going through kind of what happened right before this. So made from every disciple they encountered on their way bowed with their eyes lowered, and some even went as far as to kneel. Qing Tong Zhenren completely ignored all of them and strode right into Qingning Palace's Grand Hall. Made from high-quality sparkling black crystal, the Grand Hall was a beautiful sight to behold. Sunshine filtered through its translucent walls, reflected off the black and gold floor, seeming to dance with each step they took, which made the spacious Grand Hall feel a little less desolate. The hall had few furnishings, just a long plush couch in the center and a few cushions strewn around it. With a light wave of his sleeves, Qing Tong sat on the couch and looked up at Mo Tianliao. "You." Realizing his master still didn't know his name, Mo Tianliao tactfully stepped forward and introduced himself. "Disciple Mo Tianliao pays his respects to Shizen." Few in Taishuan knew his real name, and most only knew him by his title, the Venerable Demon Lord Duan Tian. His current doubts aside, he counted himself lucky to get to cultivate under Qing Tong Zhenren's tutelage. It would cut down on his having to interact with many other people, and this sanctum master with a high cultivation level would be able to give him a pointer or two, unlike the second-generation disciples whose understanding of the cultivation arts wasn't even a fraction of his own. For that reason, Mo Tianliao didn't want to deceive his master with a fake name. Qing Tong quietly watched him and made no move to tell him to get up. After a moment, Mo Tianliao slowly lifted his head. "Shizen, about the discipleship initiation ceremony. Different sects had different protocols, so he certainly couldn't expect the same ceremonial rules here that he'd followed back when he had taken the old sleazeball as his master. But he still didn't know the etiquette Etiquette of Wu Yun sect. No need for that. Ching Tong shook his head. Give me your hand and let me take a look. Discipleship initiation naturally meant he had to let his master read his bones to determine his aptitude. But then again, his wood fire. Mo Tian Liao was hesitant. A fire of a different attribute was a treasure of the universe, and such things were best kept secret before he regained his powers. However, he looked up at his stunningly beautiful master. If he hid this from even his master, he could forget about obtaining cultivation techniques that actually suited him. Making up his mind, Mo Tianliao rolled up his sleeve and held out his right arm. He watched as Ching Tong's hand extended from the wide white sleeve, so fair it was almost transparent. Two long, slender fingers slowly settled on a wrist the color of honey. I like that contrast. The sensation of being touched by what felt like the finest white jade, cool but with just a trace of warmth, momentarily distracted Mo Tianliao before he realized something was off. He'd extended his right hand, so his master, who was sitting opposite him, should have used his left hand to take his pulse. Why did he use his right hand too? Before Mo Tianliao could figure it out, those pretty fingers pulled away. Ching Tong stared at him in wordless silence for a moment, then got up and tossed a jade slip in Mo Tianliao's face. Figure it out yourself. Don't bother me unless it's absolutely necessary. Then he left with a flick of his sleeves. The doors to the inner chamber opened and closed with a bang, and the peerless beauty disappeared from his sight. Hang on, I've seen a lot of messages popping up. Sprains are the worst. I sprained my ankle once by tripping over an extension cord. Oh, I've sprained my ankle so many times. It's not even funny. Oof, that's rough. That definitely sounds like something I do. Yep, me too. I felt so dumb. I hated staying off my ankle too. Oh. Oh, you think you feel dumb. I broke my ankle dancing in my hallway, not even 24 hours after I'd driven my parents to visit my sister. I didn't even make it 24 hours. I had to call a friend to come take me to the hospital. Oh, I felt so dumb. And yes, it is so inconvenient. But yes, Honey and Jade is definitely giving Renwan. And it was so embarrassing. This was during COVID, and it was so bad. I felt so stupid. No, my friend helped me out. It ended up fine, but I was just oh, it was so dumb. Um, but yeah. I'm personally not convinced this is an Erha fanfic that got out of hand. I mean, got a good start to it if it is. Mo Tian Liao took the jade slip off his face and blinked. Unlike a bamboo slip where the text was written out plain for anyone to see, the contents of a jade slip like this could only be read by a cultivator. You had to use your divine sense to access the information. He was supposed to be a mere mortal who hadn't even learned to absorb spiritual energy, wasn't he? How did his new master expect him to figure out this jade slip on his own? Shizunen, have you forgotten something? With the jade slip in hand, Mo Tian Liao walked out of the grand hall and squatted at the entrance. He looked at the spiritual energy that had condensed into colorful ribbons in the sunlight, then at the jade slip, and sighed. A tall figure blocked the sun in front of him. Mo Tian Liao looked up to see a man in his 30s in a plain-colored brocade robe smiling down at him. Mo Tian Liao suddenly remembered that he could seek guidance from fellow disciples in Wu Yun sect. Of course, he didn't need personal instruction from his master for minor stuff like learning to absorb spiritual energy. Using that as his cover, he could relax and focus on cultivating the basic techniques. Realizing this, Mo Tian Liao promptly stood up with a smile that, coupled with his young looks, gave him the appearance of an innocent youth. Shixiang, how should I address you? A look of alarm came over the man's face, and he bowed. I am Su Heng, a second-generation disciple of Wu Qing's sanctum. Shishu, you mustn't address me as Shixiang. So, Shishu is a term for a younger peer of one's master. So the corners of innocent youth Mo Tian Liao's lips twitched. Su Heng was here to look after him temporarily. As he led Mo Tian Liao to his quarters, he explained the current situation of Wu Qing sanctum. It's going to be an issue. Apparently, he was only the second personal disciple his beautiful Shizun had ever taken. All the second-generation disciples here were taught by his senior, who is currently away training. As such, Mo Tianliao was presently the second highest in seniority after the Sanctum Masters. No one would dare to order him around, but no one was qualified to guide him either. Mo Tianliao felt a headache coming on. His new home was a small courtyard in Qingning Palace, and the decorations and furnishings were all very luxurious. Once he'd dismissed the chatty Su Hang, Mo Tianliao sat cross-legged on the bed and pressed the jade slip to his forehead to see what kind of cultivation technique it was. Techniques had to match a cultivator's attributes. In his previous life, he'd had the dual attributes of earth and fire, so he's well versed in earth and fire elements. Fire could strengthen earth, so he'd primarily focused on earth-based spells. Now that he possessed an innate wood attribute, which came with a wood fire that he still didn't know how to use, he could employ both wood and fire elemental spells. Wood could spark fire, so he'd have to concentrate on fire as his main offensive attribute going forward. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth. The five elements complemented each other. If someone with dual attributes possessed two complementary ones, like wood and fire, they could achieve twice the results with half the effort. With proper cultivation, they might even become more powerful than those with a single attribute. But if they had two conflicting attributes, such as water and fire, then they were terribly unlucky. They would have to learn both types of spells separately, as they couldn't be used simultaneously. Their offensive power could be even worse than those with three attributes. Mo Tianliao knew little about wood-based techniques. This was the reason he had to take a master. In his current penniless state, it'd be hard for him to get his hands on a top-notch technique. The moment the jade slip touched his forehead, his powerful divine soul perceived its contents in their entirety. It contained the art of burning wood, which described a special technique suitable for a person with wood and fire attributes. Delighted, Mo Tianliao mentally read the content of the first chapter. Then he opened his eyes with a peculiar expression on his face. Bafflingly, the manual only allowed him to read one chapter every day. The Art of Burning Wood, Chapter 1, Fruit Tree. Upon the southern mountain stands a tree, which yields a fruity scent when set aflame. Seek a deer and burn it o'er this wood. In other words, there was a tree with a fruity fragrance on the spiritual, energy-rich, sun-facing southern mountain. He was supposed to cut down this tree, hunt a deer, ignite the wood, and grill the deer over the fire. And that was the entire first chapter. What in the world even was this technique? Mini extra. Woodworker. Shizun. Are you sure this isn't a cookbook? Shizun. This is a cultivation novel, not a Michelin guidebook. Woodworker. Oh, so it's really not a cookbook? Shizun quietly bears glinting claws. Woodworker. Of course, this must be a top-tier technique. I'll cultivate it right away. Um, okay. So, it's fun. The world kind of runs on different rules, and fellow disciples are oddballs. The Elixirist and Bai Luo are my personal favorites. Excellent. I can't wait. Is it me, or do a lot of cultivation training arcs resemble weird scavenger hunts? Yes, they do. And hello, Rika. Okay. So, the counts that we are looking for this time are cat swipes, which is sitting at 5, and petty, which is sitting at 4. All right. Quick sip and let me start. Chapter 6 Pawpaw. According to conventional cultivation methods, beginners should start by learning how to absorb the spiritual energy of the universe into their bodies, channel it into their meridians, and convert it into their own spiritual power. Every individual has different elemental attributes and should therefore absorb the related kinds of spiritual energy. Take Mo Tian Liao, for example. He would have to absorb the spiritual energies of both the wood and fire elements. Once he could smoothly channel the spiritual energies of those elements into his body, the initial stage would be considered a success. But this art of burning wood mentioned nothing about absorbing spiritual energy, leaving even the worldly and knowledgeable demon lord scratching his head. A knock at the door snapped Mo Tian Liao out of his confusion. Shishu, the outer disciple has delivered your meal. Oh, female. Shishu, the outer disciple has delivered your meal. A tall female disciple entered with a box of food and set it down on the table without waiting for Mo Tian Liao to respond. Cultivators had to progress through the chi refining, foundation, establishment, core formation, nascent soul, and soul transformation stages before tribulation. Once they reached the core formation stage and above, they could sustain themselves on inedia pills, while those at the nascent soul stage could abstain from food entirely. Thus, the majority of the sect disciples still had to eat, and the task of cooking meals fell to the outer disciples. These outer disciples couldn't enter the sanctum, so the inner disciples were in charge of distributing the food. Mo Tian Liao furrowed his brows slightly as he looked up at her. The young woman, with her pretty features and graceful figure, was a rarity, even in the cultivation world, but the arrogance on her face detracted somewhat from her beauty. Oh boy. Why do I have a feeling she's gonna have beef with him from the absolute second that he exists? Su Shin was a second generation disciple with a pure fire element attribute, just a hair's breadth away from a heaven attribute, yet a person of her aptitude could only manage to be a second generation disciple in Wu Qing's sanctum. Why on earth should someone with dual attributes and past the age of 16 to boot get to be a personal disciple under the direct tutelage of Qing Tong's Zanren? Yep, she got beef. She got grade A prime beef. Leave it there, Mo Tian Liao said coolly, wiping the smile from his face. Having spent centuries as a demon lord, he didn't miss the contempt on this girl's face. It would have been nothing out of the ordinary for the personal disciples to disdain him if he'd been a regular inner disciple at the blessed sanctuary of 1,000 sprouts. But coming from a junior, it was downright disrespectful. I think it's more her pride that's causing this, but maybe he is just too pretty, Annika. Yeah. His obsidian eyes were as deep as icy waters as he looked at her blankly. The sight made her take an involuntary step back, and as she did, she got a clear look at him. He had an extraordinarily handsome face, with an air of dominance. Although he was still mortal, those eyes seemed to see right through her. He radiated an aura no less formidable than the sect leaders, perhaps even more intimidating. Oh no, he's hot and I hate him. Embarrassed at being cowed, Su Shin unleashed her own power. She was late to join the sect and had only just established her foundation, but she had already begun to consolidate her divine soul, and the power of her soul as it was now could drive mortals to their knees. Mo Tian Liao threw her a puzzled look. Other than a fleeting sense of satisfaction, what benefit could she gain from challenging him in such a crude manner? People probably just assume he got chosen for his looks. Oh, honey, no. Yeah, no, that's a big taboo. She's challenging his hierarchy that her shizen decided, which is very dumb. Um, because he's literally been handpicked by their shizen to be a higher position than her, and she is literally the second she meets him challenging his authority. He jumped off his bed and strolled to the dining table completely unaffected. Su Shin, on the other hand, felt as though a massive boulder was weighing down on her, making it increasingly hard for her to breathe. By the time Mo Tian Liao was close, she had collapsed to her knees. Shizzy, what are you doing? Mo Tian Liao lifted the hem of his robe and sat down. Well, he had lost his cultivation. His soul was still that of a demon lord at the soul transformation stage. A mere junior cultivator at the foundation establishment stage couldn't withstand its power. Also, she's not going to win it. Oh no. Su Shin looked terrified. She's Shu. Please forgive me. I was in the wrong. Suddenly finding it rather pointless to squabble with the young girl, Mo Tian Liao retracted his aura and waved her away. I don't need anyone to attend to me during meals. There's no need to go to such extremes. You may leave. He'd characterized her being forced to her knees as an attempt to stay behind and serve him his meal, which infuriated Su Shin so much that she almost coughed up blood. However, she didn't dare say anything. She quickly took her leave. Several fellow disciples pulled her aside as soon as she emerged. So, how was it? Naturally, Shishu is quite talented for Shizu. To have chosen him. That was all Su Shin could bring herself to say. With that, she left, her face pale. She could never tell anyone of the terrifying power of his divine soul. Otherwise, her attempt to bully him would be exposed, and she would be severely punished according to the sex rules. So, Shizu is a term for the master of one's own master. It had been a long day, and by the time he'd finished his meal, the sky had darkened. Mo Tian Liao tossed the jade slip into his inventory bracelet and lay on the bed. Closing his eyes, he drifted off to sleep. The mountains were abundant with spiritual energy, and the entire Wuqing sanctum was his master's domain, so there was no danger. After over 3 centuries, Mo Tian Liao could finally sleep peacefully on a soft bed. God, that's got to be the best sleep of his life right there. He slept so soundly that it was late morning by the time he woke up the next day. After breakfast, he continued to study the art of burning wood, but he still could only read chapter 1. Apparently, he would never access the second chapter if he didn't follow the instructions. Mo Tian Liao scratched his head, got properly dressed, and headed out to ask where he could find this fruit scented tree. The main peak was deserted. Mo Tian Liao glanced at the silent Qingning Palace. He couldn't resist taking a stroll around. The main doors to the inner chamber were still shut, though, so his master was still in seclusion. He couldn't help but sigh. Even if he couldn't get answers to his questions, it'd still be nice if he could get another look at that gorgeous man. Even though he'd laid his eyes on his master, all other attractive men and women seemed somehow lacking. Or ever since he'd laid his eyes on his master, all other attractive men and women seemed somehow lacking. Case in point, the beautiful Su Shin from yesterday. In his previous life, she could have been a furnace tender in his domain. But now she just looked ugly. So fitting that his first task is to find a fruity tree. That's pretty funny, Annika. Yeah. Dejected, Mo Tian Liao went over to an earthen hill nearby where a group of disciples in form fitting, plain colored outfits were practicing with their swords on a platform made of celestite. Well, that'd be pretty. Over a dozen magical weapons glinted silver in the daylight, creating an array of intersecting sword energy with each rise and fall. Mo Tian Liao stopped in his tracks. This swordplay was exquisite, likely derived from the drop dead wild goose stance from the Thousand Suns sword manual. However, it had been modified, and while it was a lot simpler than the original, it was much more practical. Whoever had modified this swordplay was a genius. Shishu! The person at the front spotted him. It was Su Hang, the one who was always cheerful. Mo Tian Liao gave him a slight nod. Su Hang sheathed his sword, gestured for the others to continue, and approached Mo Tian Liao to pay his respects. "Uh, Greetings, Shishu." Teaching the disciples swordplay? Mo Tian Liao glanced at Su Hang. When he'd probed this junior of his yesterday with his divine soul, he'd found that he was already in the middle of the core formation stage. So when he saw him practicing base swordplay here, Mo Tian Liao assumed he was teaching the disciples. No, we're doing our morning practice. Su Hang wiped his sweat. Seeming to notice Mo Tian Liao's confusion, he smiled and explained. Everyone here is a second generation disciple who has to train here for 2 hours every morning, regardless of cultivation. Mo Tian Liao was taken aback. His aptitude in his previous life had been average, but he had advanced to the soul transformation stage within 300 years due to his solid foundation. Other than cultivating the cultivation arts daily, he had also unfailingly trained with martial arts moves to strengthen his body. This master of his was truly extraordinary. I'm sure that doesn't have anything to play into why it's such a thing now. Is there a type of tree with a fruity scent on this mountain? Mo Tian Liao asked, remembering the reason he was here. Are you starting your cultivation? Su Hang's eyes filled with envy. He heard that when his own master, Mo Tian Liao's fellow senior, first joined the sect, he had practiced the Grandmaster's secret technique, which started with finding a wood with a fruity aroma. The fruit scent tree grows on the sun facing slope in the back mountain. According to my Shifu, it's only about 8 feet tall and the girth of a child's arm, with a bluish black bark. The back mountain was protected by prohibitive barriers, and they couldn't enter with their second generation disciple jade tokens. So Su Hang had never seen that tree. Hearing that his senior had been given the same task, Mo Tian Liao felt much more assured about the technique's validity. He grabbed a hatchet and proceeded to the back mountain in high spirits. Why do I think it's not going to be as easy as it assumes? Or, ironically, it might be exactly as easy as it sounds, and that's the hilarious part of it. I guess we'll find out. Passing through the deep and quiet bamboo forest behind Qingning Palace and over a gentle slope, he could see the verdant back mountain from a distance. Birds and animals occasionally darted by, and it didn't seem like there were any prohibitive barriers in place. Mo Tian Liao walked over unimpeded, and the scenery before him suddenly changed. The peaceful hillside with vibrant grass and wildflowers vanished abruptly, and in its place was a mountain of treasures full of exotic flowers and lush trees. Following what Su Hang had told him, Mo Tian Liao walked around the slope and soon found a grove of fruit scent trees. He swung his hatchet down at a withered branch. Clang! The blade bent. Mo Tian Liao looked at the hatchet in his hand, then back at the branch that was barely any thicker than his thumb. The corner of his mouth twitched. After a brief search, he found a dark iron ore the size of a hawthorn fruit under a rock. Holding it in his palm, he commanded, "Ignite!" Green-tinted firewood flickered into existence, then spurted out. It took multiple attempts, but in the end, he managed to control the wood fire just enough to melt the iron ore in his hand. Then he quickly smeared the molten iron onto the bent blade and straightened it out. The dark iron ore wasn't a valuable material, but it was dozens of times stronger than this ordinary hatchet had been, and he easily cut down a branch in one swing. Once he'd gathered enough firewood, Mo Tian Liao went hunting for a deer. He skinned it, drained its blood, and cleaned it up by the stream. An artificer was, at heart, a craftsman who could meticulously carve even the most intricate of patterns. Preparing ingredients was nothing to him. He hung the meat and snapped his fingers, conjuring a small flame on his fingertip to set the fruit scent wood on fire. Fresh damp wood was usually hard to ignite, but it posed no problem for his wood fire, and the wood burst into flame. Mo Tian Liao froze in place for a moment, still holding the dry leaves he'd meant to use as kindling before hoisting the meat higher to keep it from being charred by the intense heat. It's nice being your own forge. An enticing fruity aroma wafted from the wood and slowly infused the meat. Mo Tian Liao glanced at the jade slip. Still no chapter 2. He set it aside, picked up his hatchet, and began to use it to carve the deer antler he'd cut off. Pointy ears, tiny body, long tail. Mo Tian Liao gazed at the lifelike cat sculpted out of antler in his palm, wondering whether Paw Paw had grown up. Getting the nagging feeling that something was watching him, he looked sharply up at the tree canopy overhead and spotted a pair of crystal clear, light-colored glass eyes staring unblinkingly at him. Mo Tian Liao forgot everything else when he saw those eyes. A half-grown cat was sitting there quietly, its snow-white fur pure and unblemished. On its left front paw was a small ring inlaid with precious gemstones and engraved with intricate patterns. It was identical to his old bracer, and could change size according to the movement of the cat's paw. Leaping onto the branch, Mo Tian Liao crouched on the tree and slowly brought his face close to the cat. The white cat stayed put and waited for him to climb up. Paw Paw? Mo Tian Liao murmured in disbelief, and he was promptly rewarded with a swat from his feline lordship. So, I'll take that as a swipe, so we're at 6. The cat despised this name. Every time he called him by it, he'd get swatted. No exceptions. Mo Tianliao was beside himself with delight. He scooped the cat into his arms and buried his face in its purr, nuzzling vigorously. Papa! Papa, it's really you! Meow! His feline lordship instantly bristled with fury. Damn it! What do you think you're doing? How dare you nuzzle against your Shifu's belly fur? This is pure sacrilege. Oh, so we're not even hiding it. Like, are we even attempting to hide it? I mean that's internal, but like they're not even being blunt. That's chapter 6. Like, I mean, it was pretty obvious anyway, just from context, but still. Right, Annika? Chapter 7, Energy Absorption. His feline lordship raised his paw and clawed that nuzzling face viciously. 7 claws? Ow, 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 ow! Mo Tianliao howled in pain, but he couldn't bear to lift his face from the fluffy fur, earning him another beating from those snow-white paws. 8. The meat dripped oil into the fire, causing the flames to leap higher and sear the skin crispy. The fruity scent from the wood mingled with the mouth-watering aroma of grilled meat, making their stomachs growl. It's hilarious to me that there are 3 reborn cultivators named Mo, and they're all terrible at naming stuff. It's pretty entertaining. I mean, technically, Wei Wuxian's just borrowing the name and body, but still, it counts. Oh, I missed a thing. A moment later, Mo Tianliao crouched by the fire with his hair a mess, while the white cat sat on a round rock beside him, looking the picture of elegance as he licked his paw. Once he was finished grooming himself, the cat sniffed the air and called out to Mo Tianliao. Meow! Oh, apparently it's soft. Meow! The soft voice completely melted the demon lord's heart, and he couldn't help but lean in. Papa, do you want some deer meat? Give me a kiss, and I'll cut some for you. The white cat cocked his little head and looked at the scratches on Mo Tianliao's face, but there was no blood, just a few white streaks. It looked like his new body had even thicker skin than before. So the cat took aim at that beautifully defined jaw, opened his mouth, and chomped. Ketchizen is cute. I agree, Pikmin. Welcome. Ow! A piercing cry reverberated across the mountains, startling several birds into flight. I'm going to count it as a swipe, even though it's a chomp. So we are already at 9 swipes. After being rewarded with another set of bite marks from his feline lordship, Mo Tianliao finally behaved himself. Obediently, he sliced the grilled meat into thin pieces, served them on some leaves he'd washed with spring water, and laid it out before the cat. Mo Tianliao watched the fluffy little thing sniff at it disdainfully, take a tentative bite, then nibble it up, and he couldn't help smiling as he cut a piece for himself. The birds and animals here consumed plants imbibed with spiritual energy all year round, so their flesh was rich in spiritual energy too, which made their meat much tastier than ordinary meat. All the seasoning they needed was a sprinkle of fine salt. The venison was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. The moment it entered his mouth, his senses were flooded with a rich aroma of fruit. It wasn't sweet exactly, but it had a delicate fragrance that cut the greasiness of the meat. Man and cat ate with great relish. After he was finished, Mo Tian Liao tried to extinguish the fire only to discover that the stream water couldn't put out his wood fire. He set the remaining half of the deer aside and left the wood to burn out on its own. Why do I feel like that's not gonna happen? The cat glanced at the helpless Mo Tian Liao and waved his furry paw before pressing it to the ground. Crack, crack, crack! A thin trail of ice crystal rapidly formed on the rock beneath his paw and snaked toward the flames, instantly freezing both wood fire and firewood. The aggressive green flame promptly wilted and shrank inside the ice until it completely vanished. Mo Tian Liao, who had gone to the stream to wash his hands and fix his messy hairdo, returned to find this spectacular ice display. Paw Paw. Mo Tian Liao froze as a thought occurred to him. He hurriedly sat down on the grass and cradled the cat. The white cat, clearly not wanting to be cuddled, squirmed and tried to scratch him. It counts. 10. Paw Paw. Mo Tian Liao hurriedly held the cat up at eye level. Let me check something. It's definitely one way to put out a fire. Yes, Truffle. It was hard for him to believe no one had ever taken note of this incredible cat, what with his exceptional aptitude. Had the little guy been captured or bullied by anyone in the years he'd been gone? The cat raised his gleaming eyes, taking in Mo Tian Liao's worried expression, then huffed in begrudging consent. Mo Tian Liao held the cat close and pressed his forehead against that fuzzy little head. Their divine souls connected. It seemed that Paw Paw was still a wild, untamed cat who had yet to sign a blood pact with anyone else. Paw Paw is amazing! Delighted, Mo Tian Liao planted a kiss on the cat's head. The cat's tail stiffened. Jerk! How dare you take liberties with your shizen? Struggling, he leapt onto Mo Tian Liao's lap and glared at him. When the man couldn't resist leaning in, he turned and showed him his tail. God, I love this. Mo Tian Liao chuckled and stroked his feline lordship's fur to soothe him. The Great War between the gods and demons 8,000 years ago had resulted in a leakage of demonic aura from the demon realm into the Tianshuan continent, tainting its spiritual energy. Cultivators who used this impure energy were prone to succumbing to their inner demons and going off the deep end. To smoothly progress with their cultivation, they had to rely on elixirs or spiritual treasures, but the higher they cultivated, the stronger that inner turmoil would become. Sometimes, even a single fight could cause their spiritual energy to run amok. In time, they discovered that there was something even more efficient than elixirs: spirit beasts. Spirit beasts were different from wild beasts. They were creatures with spiritual intelligence who were also capable of cultivation, and they were born with powerful divine souls that were clean and gentle. Signing a blood pact with a spirit beast and taming it into a soul beast could dispel a cultivator's inner demons and calm their turbulent spiritual energy. For this reason, spirit beasts without masters were always in high demand. The better their aptitudes, the more helpful they would be to the cultivator. Paw Paw, it's been 300 years. Why are you still so small? Mo Tian Liao stretched out his fingers to measure the cat. The kitten, that had been the size of his palm, was now a mere 9 inches from nose to tail. Still a tiny little thing. The cat ignored him and took his time licking his paws. So, 9 inches, I think, is like maybe this much. So that's not a big cat. He's not kidding. That's a pretty small cat. Yeah, what a small boy. Mo Tian Liao cradled the ball of fluff in his arms and stroked that sleek fur. Did anyone bully you all these years I wasn't by your side? whoever did, point them out to me the next time you see them. I'll beat them up for you." Comfortable with being petted, Paw Paw stopped struggling and went limp in those warm arms, his long tail dropping in contentment, swishing in tandem with Mo Tian Liao's movements. The fluffy little thing drifted off to sleep, thinking, "Hmm, this fabric's too coarse to sleep in. I'll have to get this fool new clothes tomorrow." Mo Tian Liao chuckled and nuzzled the cat's back with his cheek. He couldn't really care less about people, but he had infinite patience for furry little creatures, especially this little one with a bad temper. Ever since the old sleazeball passed away, this cat had been his only companion. To Mo Tian Liao, Paw Paw wasn't a possession. He was his dearest kin. Carrying the blissed out cat, Mo Tian Liao took out the jade slip. As expected, the second chapter had appeared after he'd grilled the deer. The Art of Burning Wood, Chapter 2, Energy Absorption. In a secluded place, absorb the spiritual energy of the universe into your meridians. Channel first the wood, then the fire. Wood through the limbs, fire to the dantian. That's all? Mo Tian Liao looked it over repeatedly, but that was really all there was to it. Ordinary manuals came with a lengthy introduction on channeling spiritual energy, the mantras and mental techniques involved, and even an explanation of what energy absorption or spiritual energy was. The art of burning wood didn't look like it was meant for beginners, but for accomplished cultivators starting anew. At this thought, Mo Tian Liao gave a start and looked down at the jade slip in his hands, remembering that it was inscribed with the divine soul, so naturally it required a divine soul to be read. Cultivators without divine souls wouldn't be able to read it at all. Mortals who were just starting out had to read books instead. Shizen. Mo Tian Liao took a deep breath. It seemed Qing Tong Zanren had known from the start that he was a previously skilled cultivator reborn in a new body, so he hadn't bothered playing games and had simply thrown the jade slip at his face. "Meow." The little cat answered sleepily at the sound of Mo Tian Liao's voice. Mo Tian Liao patted the furry creature in his arms, feeling a little worried. If his master had seen through him, what about the sect leader? Typically, no one, no matter how powerful a cultivator they were, could tell if someone had been reborn through possession of another's body as long as the person in question didn't expose themselves. At least, unless there were some secret methods he wasn't aware of. Even though Qing Tong Zenren knew, though, he hadn't struck his new disciple dead. He'd even given him a suitable technique to cultivate. He clearly bore him no malice. Mo Tian Liao decided he should eventually confess to his master to get a better read on the situation. Mo Tian Liao was in a good mood now that he had found his cat. As for everything else, well, where there's a will, there was a way. Nothing to worry about. Cradling the cat, Mo Tian Liao wrapped the remaining half of the deer in large leaves and stomped out the ice shards that Papa had created to ensure that the wood fire was fully extinguished. Then he headed back down the mountains. When he returned to Qingning Palace, he saw a crowd gathered at the entrance to his courtyard. "Greetings, Shishu!" Seeing Mo Tian Liao, the crowd bowed to him. Whether this was a sincere greeting or just for show, at least they looked respectful on the surface. Mo Tian Liao nodded. "What brings you here?" The group looked at each other before pushing Su Heng, the one most familiar with Mo Tian Liao, forward. Su Heng looked embarrassed, but he steeled himself and answered. To reply to Shishu, our Shifu has been traveling for over 3 months now, and there's no one to attend to the routine affairs of our realm. We are at a loss for what to do. And now that you are here, it's only right for us to hand those matters over to you. The so called routine affairs referred to the sect's non cultivation matters. While everyone was here to cultivate, daily necessities like food, clothing, expenses, and social relations couldn't be overlooked. Mo Tianliao's demon palace used to have a dedicated steward to handle all these, although he often had to deal with some tasks himself. However, he had no cultivation now, and asking him to take charge of Wuqing Sanctum was really. Mo Tianliao surveyed the crowd. Their expressions varied, but it was clear many of them were just there to watch the show. Understanding dawned on him. When all was said and done, these so called prides of heaven still couldn't accept a dual attribute person becoming the personal disciple of a sanctum master. They wanted to find out what this mortal was capable of, and also to offload the tedious tasks holding them back from their own cultivation. Two birds, one stone. Put them in my quarters. I'll look them over. All disciples in charge come here after morning practice tomorrow to receive instructions. Mo Tianliao handed the rest of the deer to Su Heng. Today's hunt from the back mountain. You can share it among yourselves. Without waiting for their response, he entered his quarters. The crowd traded glances, then carried the account books and seal in after him. Su Heng waited outside with the meat in hand until Mo Tianliao waved them away. Looking at the mountain of accounts on his table, Mo Tianliao scoffed. Had they brought him all the accounts from 100 years ago until modern day? Leaving those aids for now, he took out a spiritual stone from his inventory bracelet and embedded it in a nook at the corner of the courtyard. A faint barrier of light instantly enveloped the entire courtyard. Cultivation sucks. Yay, new guy. Now we can load him up with paperwork. This was a built-in protective barrier that could be activated with a spiritual stone. He was going to try absorbing spiritual energy into his body tonight, and no way would he let anyone disturb him. He's entering his Shang Qinghua era. Mini extra. Woodworker. Shizun, you knew I've been reborn through possession? Duh. What a dumb disciple. Woodworker. What do you hope to achieve by threatening me with this? Shizun. What do you think? Duh. Woodworker lies down. Come on, then! I won't resist! Shizun raises paw, sending him flying with a swat. Oh, goodness. All right, chapter 8. Chapter 8. Good night's sleep. Drawing spiritual energy into one's body was easier around midnight, when the spiritual energy was at its most placid, so its calmest. For now, after he'd set up the protective barrier, Mo Tianliao took a seat at the table and began reviewing the account books. The cat inside his robes woke and poked his snow-white head out of his collar. He cast a lazy glance at the papers on the table and yawned. Mo Tianliao craned his neck down, trying to kiss him, but his collar opening was too low, so he gave up. Awake now, Pawpaw? Are you hungry? The cat bounded up from his collar to his shoulder and peered down at the account book in his hand. Mo Tianliao nuzzled the cat with his ear. The Wuqing Sanctum's routine affairs are a mess. The cat scratched his ear with his hind paw. What mess! I don't see anything wrong with them. Not expecting an answer from the little furball, Mo Tian Liao started scanning through the account book. These second-generation disciples thought that bringing him all these books would overwhelm him, but to Mo Tian Liao, who possessed a divine soul at the soul transformation stage, it was a piece of cake. After all, with a soul at that level, one could read countless books a day and still remember every word. Less than 2 hours later, Mo Tian Liao had gone through all the account books on the table. Overall, it wasn't too messy. At least it was clear who was supposed to do what. However, the allocation wasn't optimal, with many unclear processes and loopholes. Take, for example, the monthly allocation of resources for Wuqing Sanctum. Every month, the sect leader's Chamber of Administrative Affairs would deliver those Every month, the sect leader's Chamber of Administrative Affairs would deliver those resources over to the Sanctum Masters, and the various chief disciples would then distribute them to the individual disciples. This process left plenty of room for someone to engage in funny business. There was no guarantee of fairness for all. Mo Tian Liao closed the books, having already thought of a plan. It was getting late. He stretched. Paw, let's get some sleep. He carried the cat to bed, intending to take a nap to recharge before it was time to cultivate at midnight. Meow! The fluffy little white creature struggled free from Mo Tian Liao's arms and jumped off the bed. He clearly had no intention of napping with him. Mo Tian Liao propped his head up on one hand and looked at the cat sitting on the floor. Go play by yourself if you don't want to sleep, and don't go around eating random food. The cat couldn't escape the courtyard with the barrier in place, so Mo Tian Liao fell asleep without worrying about it. The white cat leapt onto the windowsill, glanced back at the sleeping Mo Tian Liao, twitched his ear, and jumped out, effortlessly passing through the courtyard's barrier. He made his way through the night to Qingning Palace, which was lit up with lamps made of colored glaze. Light shone through the crystal walls, making the whole place breathtakingly beautiful. The white cat sprang onto the jade steps and transformed into a tall, slender man in a flash of white light. Dressed in white robes, he seemed to emanate a subtle glow as he ascended. The palace doors opened before he reached them, and the brightly lit interior illuminated his impossibly handsome face. The face of none other than the master of this palace, Qing Tong. Sanctum, master. Several attendants in white dresses stepped forward and bowed as he entered the inner chamber. One of them carried his robes, another held a teacup, and yet another had a jade comb in hand. Hanukkah. Yes. Qing Tong Zenrin lifted his arms, allowing the attendants to take off his sheer outer robe and change him into softer garments. Then they removed his exquisite jade crown and smoothed his hair with a comb, running it all the way to the ends of those silky ink-black strands. He waved them away with a fair, almost translucent hand. The attendants disappeared just as quickly as they had appeared. Qing Tong raised his left hand, and his smooth, wide sleeve slid down, revealing a bracelet 3 fingers wide, clasped tightly around his delicate forearm. Hello, Esper Lady. We have blatantly had it announced that Qing Tong Zanren is Shizun and is also Paw the cat. So, now we had some attempts at bullying of Mo Tian Liao, and it kind of failed because he took care of the account books instantly, which was what the disciples tried to bully him about. and now he is about to attempt to cultivate, but now we are in Qingtong Zenren. This is point of view, and I just spelled tea on myself. But I'm more worried because it looked like it might have gotten close to my microphone. That's okay. It wasn't that hot. It's fine. Okay, so that's where we are. He waved them away with a fair, almost translucent hand. The attendants disappeared just as quickly as they had appeared. Jing Tong raised his left hand and his smooth, wide sleeve slid down, revealing a bracelet 3 fingers wide, clasped tightly around his delicate forearm. Dark blue gemstones sparkled brilliantly against the intricate, luxurious silver casting. So ornately beautiful that female cultivators would have willingly paid tens of thousands of spiritual stones for it if they had laid their eyes on it. Mo Tian Liao always prioritized functionality over aesthetics for his creations. Most of the time, they turned out ugly. Only the items he made for his cat were this meticulously and exquisitely crafted. Everyone said Lord Duantian had superb skills, but poor taste. Little did they know he was the finest artisan of all. Those people just weren't worth his efforts. Oh, I'm sorry, Truffle. Ching Tong lowered his hand, letting his sleeve fall to cover the beautiful sight within. He walked through the layers of sheer curtains in the inner chamber toward his bedchamber. The spacious bedchamber was dark, although it didn't affect Ching Tong's vision as he strolled over to the large, soft bed and sank into its embrace. He'd finally found his human. He could now sleep in peace. And gravity's been pretty strong this week. But that's really sweet. He'd finally found his human. He could now sleep in peace. The moon ascended high in the sky. Midnight finally arrived. Mo Tian Liao opened his eyes and estimated the time, thinking he ought to craft an artifact for timekeeping when he had some free time. It was really tiresome to be constantly guessing. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, he took out the few spiritual stones he had left in his inventory bracelet and placed them beside him. This place was abundant with spiritual energy, so logically there should be enough for his use. However, accidents could happen, and one could never be too prepared. If he failed, he would damage his meridians, and he would need a month's rest before he could make another attempt. He'd need to succeed on the first try. He positioned his left hand above, with the middle finger pressing against his right palm, while the middle finger of his right hand was positioned below, pressed against the base of his left middle finger. Both hands were in the shape of an unopened lotus bud, ensuring they'd be connected once the spiritual energy entered his body and that the flow of the exchange wouldn't happen too fast. He closed his eyes, but his vision didn't go dark. His spiritual divine soul allowed him to clearly perceive the spiritual energy flowing around him in 5 swirling hues of red, orange, yellow, green, and blue. The way of heaven takes from what is in excess to make whole. What is in death? What is in dearth? Well, the way of man takes from those in want to offer to those who lack for naught. I'm going to reread that again because it's Tao Te Chong by Lao Tzu, chapter 77. The way of heaven takes from what is in excess to make whole. What is in dearth whilst the way of man takes from those in want to offer to those who lack for naught. Follow the course of nature, for that is the way of the Tao. Align with heaven's will, know your destiny, and use what is in survey in the universe to remedy your own deficiencies. Mo Tianliao's new body wasn't an ordinary human body, so he couldn't directly absorb spiritual energy. He had to follow the art of burning wood's instructions to first absorb wood based spiritual energy into his body, then channel the fire and element spiritual energy into his danshin. Imagine myself as the undying tree that stands between heaven and earth, and all the spiritual energies of the wood shall be mine to command. Countless wisps of green spiritual energy swirled tentatively around him before gushing into him from all directions, like trickling rivulets streaming into a mountain creek. The wood based spiritual energy was full of vitality as it circulated through his limbs and bones. Mo Tian Liao felt like a sapling absorbing water. His limbs slowly stretched under the abundance of spiritual energy, and his joints popped. He carefully controlled the circulation as it flowed between his hands, and the spiritual energy coursed through his body in streams as wide across as a man's finger, speeding until it peaked. He instantly put his palms together. As countless rivers to the vast oceans flow, so do spiritual energies in all creation go. His eyes snapped open, glowing green. He'd succeeded. He gradually concluded his meditation, looking delighted. No matter how good someone's aptitude, some degree of obstruction was inevitable in the process of absorbing energy. Even heaven attribute cultivators with broad meridians would be hindered by the limitations of their physical flesh. But with the body of the divine tree, Mo Tian Liao could absorb spiritual energy into his flesh and blood. If one imagined that a person with a single attribute was sucking in spiritual energy through a thin bamboo straw, and a person with a heaven attribute absorbed the same energy through a bamboo pipe, Mo Tian Liao was essentially siphoning it in through a huge bamboo tube. Now that he succeeded in absorbing wood based spiritual energy, Mo Tian Liao breathed a sigh of relief and proceeded to draw in fire element spiritual energy. The average person with dual attributes had to absorb both spiritual energies at the same time and prevent the two from colliding. But Mo Tian Liao wasn't a true dual attribute cultivator, so he could absorb them separately. With his divine soul, he looked internally into his body. The wood fire in his danshin was only a firefly's glow, flickering weakly. He separated his hands into an upper and lower protective position around his danshin and drew over the red spiritual energy. Before he could recite the incantation, the wood fire leaped and whirled in excitement, creating a small spiritual vortex in his core that promptly drew in the fire element spiritual energy. Ugh, Mo Tian Liao grunted. Felt as though tiny flames were converging from all over his body toward his stanchion, burning his meridians along the way. For a moment, he felt searing pain, but then his meridians adapted to the heat, leaving him feeling comfortable. It was like soaking his feet in hot water, scalding at first, but pleasant once he got used to it. When his danshin could no longer hold more spiritual energy, Mo Tian Liao cut off the absorption and slowly expelled a breath of torrid energy. The wood fire in his danshin had grown larger, and it rested lazily without moving, apparently sated. Mo Tian Liao flipped back onto the bed, too exhausted to move. Earlier, he'd discovered that his wood fire wasn't limited to the tiny one in his core. It was spread throughout his body, but he could currently only use the fire in his danshin. He'd need to keep cultivating to draw these scattered flames into his danshin. Having successfully absorbed these spiritual energies, Mo Tian Liao had a good night's sleep. Meanwhile, the gorgeous man in Qingning Palace turned over on his soft bed and slowly opened his enchanting eyes. Moonlight streamed in through the window, casting fan-shaped shadows of his long eyelashes on his face. His thin pink lips pinched softly together. Damn it. He got up, got off the bed, opened the window, and gazed out at the little courtyard at the side of the palace. Seeing that spiritual energies had stopped converging there, Ching Tong placed a hand on the windowsill for support, then gracefully leaped out and transformed into a white cat, sneaking away into the night. The man on the bed was asleep when the white cat jumped onto his bed and nudged him disdainfully. Mm. Mo Tian Liao hummed and loosened his arms slightly. The fluffy little cat burrowed into the crook of Mo Tian Liao's arms, but it wasn't as comfortable as he preferred. He pawed Mo Tian Liao's collar apart to reveal the soft inner garment underneath. Satisfied, he settled in. Papa? Sensing something furry snuggling up to him in his sleep, Mo Tian Liao smiled and hugged the furball in his arms tighter. Dummy. The cat pouted, nuzzled his head against Mo Tian Liao's stubbled chin, and closed his eyes in contentment. So cute. Mini extra, woodworker. Pray tell, what's up with Shizen sneaking into his disciple's bed in the middle of the night? Shizen. I'm here to check on your cultivation progress. Dorker. Too much effort. Why don't I just cultivate in your chamber? Doe-eyed. Shizen raises paw, sending him flying with a swat. I'm counting it. 11. It is so fluffy. Which means it's probably gonna rip our hearts out in, like, book 2. Followed by dragging it through the mud in book 3, and then slowly piecing it together in, like, the last 5 chapters. I don't know if any of that's true, but I'm putting it out there right now just because I've read enough Danmei to know that if anything's this sweet, it's gonna break my heart. My parents' cat used to steal my pillow, though. That means that they loved you. They wanna be closer to you and smell you. Okay, 122.15. Okay. Chapter 9, Affair Management. The morning sunlight streamed through the open window and shone upon the wooden bed. Mo Tian Liao's brow furrowed, and he slowly opened his eyes. Feeling something warm on his chest, he looked down and saw a snowy little ball of fluff nestled on his chest, sleeping soundly. His paws were outstretched, and one was hooked around a lock of Mo Tian Liao's hair. Oh, that's nice. 2 isn't all that angsty, full of shenanigans and jailbreaks, though. I'll take it. The warm amber sunlight shining onto the white fur made it glow, a sight so inviting Mo Tian Liao couldn't help but lean in to plant kisses on that furry head. Meow, the cat murmured, blocking Mo Tian Liao's misbehaving lips with a paw. Yawning, he opened his eyes to the sight of a silly, grinning face. Dummy! He raised a paw and swatted him on the cheek. 12. Paw, paw! Mo Tian Liao chuckled, and his grin got even wider. Life couldn't get much better than waking up to this little fluff ball in his arms. Like, dude just wanted to do his research, potentially blow up the world, and chill with his cat. Like, that's not too much to ask. I mean, maybe blowing up the world was a little extreme, but, like, you know. It's also a case study in why creating sentient artifacts is a bad idea. Oh, I could have told you that from the beginning. Um, he thought it would be years before he'd be able to find his cat. He had even mentally prepared himself for the possibility that the cat had already been forced into signing a blood pact with someone else. Whoever it was, he would have been ready to exterminate them to take his cat back. But nothing like that had happened. The two of them lounged on the bed for a while before Mo Tian Liao got up and slowly began to get ready. He'd absorbed spiritual energies a little too quickly last night, draining the spiritual stones on his bed of their energy and turning them gray. Mo Tian Liao tidied his bed while the cat sat on the pillow, eyeing those depleted stones. He raised his paw to bat at them, and the stones, no longer held together by spiritual energy, instantly crumbled to dust. What was once a slightly messy bed had become a dump site. Mo Tian Liao looked in resignation at the unsightly bed and picked the cat up in his arms. Forget it. Let's bathe first. He had worked up quite a sweat last night and still felt sticky. Although this courtyard was technically part of Qingning Palace, it was in a completely different style from the magnificent palace. Simple and rustic, it seemed more like a home in the countryside. It had all the essentials, though: a bedroom, a bathroom, and a small kitchen. There was a tub in the bathroom, but no hot water. Mo Tian Liao filled it with fresh water from the well in the courtyard, then consolidated the wood fire in his palm and stirred it into the icy water, which promptly started steaming. Stay here and don't get wet. I'll bathe you later. Mo Tian Liao set the cat on the high stool by the tub where the perfumes were kept. Then he turned around, undressed, and stepped into the tub. The fluffy little cat looked steadily down at his paws. How dare he behave like this before his master? Shameless! I mean, you could leave. I'm just saying. Mo Tian Liao didn't notice the cat's unusual behavior and continued to happily wash himself. Absorbing spiritual energies into the body could purge any impurities within. The first time he'd absorbed spiritual energy in his previous life, he'd flushed out a whole body's worth of black sludge, but there wasn't even a single speck of muck this time. As a former tree, his body was free of filth. This was also why his feline lordship could comfortably snuggle in his arms all night. And it's not so much this thing will blow up the world, and more this thing is going to make me chi deviate out of sheer annoyance. Yeah. Pawpaw, how's your cultivation progress? Have you reached the peak of the second level? The spiritual power of spiritual beasts could advance through levels too, corresponding with the 5 stages that human cultivators went through. Some spirit beasts with exceptional aptitude could take on human form when they reached level 3 or the core formation stage. Spirit beasts were rare, and Pawpaw was the only one Mo Tian Liao had ever raised. He didn't know the speed at which they cultivated. What would you look like if you evolved into human form? Mo Tian Liao leaned against the edge of the tub and gazed at the little cat. You wouldn't end up as a little kid, would you? The cat stared back at him, refusing to dignify his words with a response. Standing up on his hind legs at the tub's edge, he reached out to fish for Mo Tian Liao's hair in the warm water, but his paw got wet and he quickly shook it dry, splashing droplets all over Mo Tian Liao's face. Having spiritual energy made life a lot more convenient for Mo Tian Liao. At the very least, his mastery of fire element spiritual energy had reached perfection. After he was done bathing, he circulated his fire element spiritual power through his body to thoroughly dry himself all over, even his long hair. Once dressed, he prepared a small basin of water and set it in the middle of the courtyard where sunlight would reach it. Then he carried the cat out. Paw, let me give you a bath, Mo Tian Liao said to the cat, pointing at the basin as he warmed the water. The white cat looked at the simple basin, then at the gently smiling Mo Tian Liao, and swished his tail. Well, considering you haven't bathed me for such a long time, I shall grudgingly allow you to serve me today. Having received his feline lordship's consent, Mo Tian Liao squatted down happily, lowered the cat into the water, and began washing his fur with practiced ease. The cat was already quite clean, so Mo Tian Liao only had to give him a quick bath. Then he wrapped the cat in a towel, channeled fire into his palms, and quickly dried the little guy from head to tail, making him warm and fluffy. But as soon as he tried to touch his belly, the cat resisted and struggled to get away. Stop fooling around. Let me dry your fur. Mo Tian Liao caught the escaping cat and reached out to touch him again, only to get a scratch for his trouble. Meow. Insolent disciple, where do you think you're touching? 13. The cat leapt onto the peach tree in the courtyard and hissed at him. Before Mo Tian Liao could speak, he turned and fled without looking back. This reminds me of Liu watching Prince Jing change. A little bit. Huh. He got mad at me again. Mo Tian Liao scratched his head. He hadn't seen this little one for centuries, and his temper had gotten even worse. Mo Tian Liao tidied up the place, changed the bed sheets, and made himself presentable. Just then, the second generation disciples who had finished their morning practice arrived. Mo Tian Liao made them all wait and watch as he took his time, eating his breakfast in front of them before at last he took out a register of names. Step forward when your name is called and tell me your daily duties, he said, flipping open the register with long, slender fingers. With a deep, melodious voice, he called out the names one at a time. Whenever he came to a disciple in charge, he then had them put their jade token on the table as proof. Everyone was surprised to discover that the elder of theirs had already reached the first level of the chi refining stage overnight. After they all stated their duties, they responded and reported on recent matters. Shishu, it's the birthday of Yanli Shibo of Wu Tian Sanctum the day after tomorrow, said Su Li, the disciple in charge of rites and ceremonies. Wu Qing Sanctum should prepare a gift. Mo Tian Liao glanced up at him. You mean prepare a birthday gift for Yanli Shixiang in Wu Qing Sanctum's name? His voice was flat, masking his feelings on the issue. Su Li didn't catch the implication. He thought Mo Tian Liao was just verifying his words, so without thinking, he answered, That's right. Humph, Mo Tian Liao snorted. Yan Li is a first-generation disciple, and his master is still alive. What sense does it make to send him a gift in the name of this entire sanctum? Su Li faltered, taken aback. He had meant to sabotage this new elder, but instead of falling for his trap, Mo Tian Liao had turned the tables on him. I mean, a proper gift in your name, he corrected himself quickly. Mo Tian Liao didn't reply. He just looked back at him inscrutably. A heavy silence filled the room. In spite of his own strapping build, Su Li felt a chill run down his spine under that gaze. He broke out in a cold sweat. Just as he was about to crack, Mo Tian Liao spoke. Is this how you usually handle affairs? Uh, um. Su Li hesitated at a loss for how to answer. Does anyone know how this should be handled? Mo Tian Liao ignored Su Li and scanned the group of disciples. Me! A pretty female disciple raised her hand. Yanli Shibo is celebrating his birthday this year because he succeeded in advancing to the nascent soul stage. The sect leader wants to reward him, hence the grand celebration. As juniors, we are not qualified to send him gifts. However, you can send him a decent gift in your and Shizen's name, then remind Shifu to give him a reward in his capacity as an elder. One of her fellow disciples discreetly tugged at her sleeve, but the girl ignored her. Why should they make things difficult for a handsome and capable Shisu? Excellent. Mo Tianliao nodded. What's your name? She hadn't been one of the disciples in charge he'd called on earlier. My name is Suen, she replied in a clear, crisp voice. From today onward, you'll be the disciple in charge of rites and ceremonies at Wuqing Sanctum. Mo Tianliao handed her the relevant jade token. Her eyes widened. After a moment of stunned silence, she joyfully accepted it with both hands. Thank you, Shishu. I'll do my best. Su Wen, who came from a noble family, had long disapproved of the petty, small-minded way Su Li handled things. She considered him a disgrace to Wuqing Sanctum. Su Li's face turned ghastly pale. Managing rites and ceremonies was a lucrative post. If he lost it, he'd only have his monthly allocation of resources to count on for his future cultivation needs. Shifu was the one who appointed me to this post. Mo Tianliao looked at him with the ghost of a smile. Then go cry to your Shifu about it when he returns. Several disciples who didn't get along with Su Li burst out laughing. Now that they'd seen Su Li's fate, the other disciples in charge behaved themselves and dutifully made their reports. Mo Tianliao swiftly handled all the affairs and made some slight changes to the distribution of tasks. He followed his own principles from his previous life when making arrangements for the assignments. Whoever would be good at a task would be the one to do it. It didn't matter if you were drop-dead gorgeous, you could still be assigned to shoveling manure. The second-generation disciples were all as docile as quails after Mo Tianliao put those errant disciples in their places. Finally satisfied, Mo Tianliao dismissed them all with a wave of his hand. After leaving the courtyard, a few of the female disciples chattered among themselves. Shishu was so imposing when he dealt with Su Li earlier. Yeah? Did you see? He'd progressed in his cultivation in just one night. His potential is limitless. Told you Shizu couldn't be wrong. And what about his looks? Our Shishu is the most handsome of his generation, right? When he glanced at me with those eyes, I could hardly breathe. Hearing the girls' discussions, the male disciples traded looks. Classic woman logic. The most handsome one was always right. Excuse you? After sending away the noisy juniors, Mo Tianliao straightened his clothes and made his way to the main hall of Qingning Palace. The hall was filled with attendants in white. It was nothing like the deserted atmosphere of the previous day. When they saw Mo Tianliao, the attendants quietly curtsied in unison, and one stepped forward. Zen Ren is awake. Would you like me to inform him of your arrival? Mo Tianliao nodded. Please do. Just say Mo Tianliao wishes to seek an audience. The attendant curtsied again and hurried off. After waiting a moment, he heard the tinkling of bells, like clear echoes from an ancient desert. The doors to the inner chamber slowly opened, and his master, dressed in white, strode toward him. Sunlight filtered through the dark crystals, and its reflection in those cold eyes sparkled like a cascade of stars across the firmament. Mo Tianliao unconsciously softened his breathing and diligently walked over to his master, offering his hand to help him to a seat. Ching Tong glanced at the long, slender arm before him and gave his right hand. The cool sensation of his master's jade-like hand sent a slight flutter through Mo Tianliao's heart. Shouldn't a master have white hair, a ruddy complexion, and a long, flowing beard? It's far too easy to succumb to temptation when his master looked like that. Mini extra. Shishu is too fierce. Shifu, save me! Disciple A. Shifu, save me! Disciple B. Shifu, I want your verdict. Disciple C. Shifu, I don't want to clean manure. Eldest Shixiang. Huh? Woodworker. They miss you. Eldest Shixiang. Oh, I see. Well done, Shidi. All disciples. Oh boy. The next chapter's title is Outfits. Alright, 140. Chapter 10, Outfits. As soon as Qing Tong reached out to Mo Tian Liao, he realized he'd made a dumb mistake. He was so used to playing the Patapaw game with this guy that the moment Mo Tian Liao gave him his hand, he felt compelled to respond. With his brow furrowing slightly, he withdrew his hand. Feeling that satiny hand leave his palm, Mo Tian Liao felt a pang of regret. But when his master shot him a cool gaze as he settled down on the plush couch, he promptly snapped out of his inappropriate thoughts and went over. What's the matter? Qing Tong accepted the glass cup an attendant handed him and took a sip of his tea. Mo Tian Liao tore his eyes away from his master's thin, pale lips. I have some important matters to report, he said, lowering his gaze. Actually, I just glanced over at our lists, and I think I need to add one more to petty because of the Suli situation. That was pretty petty to remove his role. I mean, it was the right decision if dude's not doing his job, but I'm going to mark that as a petty because it was also pretty petty. So that's now at 5. But yes. Mo Tian Liao tore his eyes away from his master's thin, pale lips. I have some important matters to report, he said, lowering his gaze. Qing Tong sat down in the teacup and waved his hand. The attendants promptly took their leave. Mo Tian Liao kneeled on the cushion by the couch and kowtowed. Shizun is wise, indeed, to have recognized that I was a man reborn. Please pardon me for not informing you earlier. Qing Tong looked down at the back of Mo Tian Liao's lowered head, tilting his own in confusion before realizing what this guy was actually saying. Not replying, he straightened his posture again before Mo Tian Liao looked up quietly at him with those clear, beautiful eyes of his. Mo Tian Liao was impressed to see his master so unruffled by this revelation. Unlike the pretentious elders of those so-called prestigious sects, his master truly radiated a naturally distinguished ethereal aura that emanated from his very soul. I'm not able to tell you my previous identity, he said, but please rest assured that I'll never do anything to endanger you or Wu Yun's sect. Qing Tong hummed in acknowledgement, his voice neutral. All right, you can get up now. Mo Tian Liao heaved a sigh of relief and sat on the cushion. Now that he'd laid all his cards on the table, he could openly discuss his cultivation with his master. Honestly, Mo Tian Liao needed little guidance when it came to cultivation. He knew exactly how to cultivate at each stage to achieve the most optimal results. His current body was special, though. He was still figuring things out, so he needed someone to discuss it with. When he heard about Mo Tian Liao's confusion on the subject of burning wood, Qing Tong gave him a tip. All creations in this world have a spirit, including celestial trees. Give it a try. Mo Tian Liao didn't think he'd ever get tired of listening to this clear and melodious voice. Although he didn't fully get the underlying meaning, he nodded and made a mental note of those words. One more thing. Mo Tianliao rarely got to see his master, so he seized his chance to report everything. Shizen has been in seclusion for quite a while, so the juniors have entrusted me with handling the sanctum's affairs. He he looked back up at his master. Seeing no reaction, Mo Tianliao interpreted this as tacit approval of his new role, so he continued speaking. Wuqing Sanctum's affairs were managed and strictly controlled by a few disciples in charge, which made both fairness and efficiency hard to achieve. Using the main sex approach as a point of reference, Mo Tianliao had established a chamber of administrative affairs to distribute resources and assign tasks, ensuring transparency in all stages of the process. Of course, he had his own selfish interest in doing all of this. While he was cultivating yesterday, he realized he needed an obscene amount of spiritual energy, and relying solely on natural sources wasn't enough. He needed a huge supply of spiritual stones. He also had plans to forge artifacts in the furnace, and that was a money-burning endeavor that would require even more resources. By establishing a chamber of administrative affairs, he could consolidate power in his own hands and make things easier for himself in the future. Qing Tong looked at him calmly. No need to say so much. Just do whatever you please. Then he stood up and walked away with a flick of his sleeves. Wait, Shizen! Mo Tianliao caught up with him. One last thing. The day after tomorrow is Yan Li Shixiang's birthday. The sect leader is planning to host a grand celebration this year. As his elder, you need to prepare a gift. Just give this to him on my behalf. With a flip of his hand, Qing Tong produced an exquisitely wrought bell and handed it to Mo Tianliao. On his way home, Mo Tianliao examined the fist-sized bell. It was made of exquisite ore, and there was a glass bead in the middle that made a musical tinkling sound when it was shaken. But no matter how gorgeous it was just a bell. Yep, this was no magical artifact, just an ordinary bell. A big, pretty bell. That was the gift a patriarch at the soul transformation stage bestowed upon a junior at the nascent soul stage. Mo Tianliao found the gift rather scalding in his hands. Perhaps there was some underlying meaning? As he was new to the sect, he didn't understand the special intricacies of the place. Scratching his head, he put the bell away and took an axe with him to the back mountain. Chapter 3 of The Art of Burning Wood had appeared when he succeeded in absorbing energy. It described 3 peculiar trees he'd have to cut down and set ablaze, and how he'd have to hunt and grill several pheasants over that fire. He hacked down at a tree, creating a gash in the wood. Through narrowed eyes, he could dimly see a wisp of green light escaping from the opening. All creations in the world have a spirit, including celestial trees. No, I know. I agree, Ruby. That's kind of where I was going with it. Cats love bells. My second thought was Mo Tianliao is going to get himself in trouble by trying to enhance the bell. And he's going to make it too powerful. But I think literally, yeah, maybe this is a bell that he plays with. Perhaps what his master meant wasn't spiritual intelligence, but spiritual energy. He looked up at the tree. It was 1,000-year-old sinking agarwood that was extremely heavy and would sink in water. It was excellent material for crafting flying darts or the like. Even a 100-year-old tree could fetch a good price, and this specimen was over 1,000. I mean, it could be meditation aid. Spiritual stones had spiritual energies contained within, so this valuable refining material naturally had it as well. However, the spiritual energy in spiritual stones had no elemental alignment, and plants only had wood element spiritual energy that humans couldn't absorb. Mo Tianliao frowned. Perhaps humans couldn't use this energy, but he wasn't purely human now. And since he could see the green light, then perhaps. He swung the axe down again, and more green light escaped. Mo Tianliao instantly activated his spiritual power. The spiritual energy of the thousand-year-old tree slid along his fingers like a tiny green snake and entered his body. Celestial trees contain spiritual energies humans couldn't use, but that wasn't a problem for a man with a divine tree body. From the looks of it, he could skip meditation and just cultivate by chopping trees. He didn't even need to bother separating the five colored spiritual energies because whatever wafted out was sure to be the wood element. And so, Mo Tian Liao spent the whole day tirelessly and happily chopping trees like he was on a treasure hunt. When he was finally done with chopping wood and splitting it into firewood, he noticed the white cat sleeping soundly on a rock. The glow of the setting sun bathed its fluffy white fur in amber. Mo Tian Liao walked over, dusted off the sawdust from his hands, and picked up the cat. Once the sun set, that rock was going to get cold. Surprisingly enough, the usually alert cat didn't wake up when he cradled it. Mo Tianliao chuckled despite himself. Carefully, he tucked the cat into the usual spot against his chest, squatted down to start a fire, and began to carve a few wooden spikes with his axe, each of them about 9 inches long. A great master wasn't limited by his tools. In Mo Tianliao's hand, the cumbersome axe became a delicate carving knife, and in no time at all, he'd carved out a set of smooth spikes. He fiddled with one, twirling the gleaming wood spike around his slender, dexterous fingers. Nearby, some brightly colored pheasants pecked around for food, clucking softly. Mo Tianliao focused his spiritual energy at his fingertips and flung the spike, nailing a passing pheasant's spread wing into a tree trunk. "We have meat to eat now, Papa." Mo Tianliao looked down at the little fluff ball who had just woken up and was poking his head out of his collar for a look, and took him along to collect the pheasant. The art of burning wood seemed to always have some kind of weird grilling request, and so the limited space inside Mo Tianliao's inventory bangle was now fully stocked with various seasonings and even clothing. As he skewered the pheasant drumsticks on long sticks pared down from the wood, Mo Tianliao sighed. The wood wasn't exceptionally precious, but it was still rare. It was a shame there was no more room in his inventory. He really needed to craft a new inventory device first thing after that feast tomorrow. Man and cat gobbled up the grilled pheasant before strolling back to the courtyard. Su Wen, who had been waiting there for a long time, promptly went up to Mo Tianliao and presented a tray. "Shishu, these are the gifts I've prepared. Do we need to add anything else?" Mo Tianliao was attending the feast tomorrow, so naturally he needed to bring gifts from Wuqing Sanctum. Being new to the sect, though, he hardly knew Yan Li, so he didn't need to give him anything too valuable. A certain quantity of spiritual stones and spiritual herbs would suffice, and that could all come from the public repository. Not finding anything missing, Mo Tianliao nodded. "Hold on to these for now. You can accompany me tomorrow." Suan's eyes lit up in delight. "Yes, Shishu." After he'd dismissed Suen, the attendants in white from Qingning Palace arrived. "What brings you all here, Gigi?" Mo Tianliao welcomed them inside with a smile. These girls weren't disciples of Wuqing Sanctum, and they didn't have particularly high cultivation either. They were just attendants who waited on the Sanctum Master. The cat in his shirt tried to peer out, but Mo Tianliao pressed his head down. Spirit beasts were exceedingly precious, and at its current level, Mo Tianliao's cultivation was too meager to protect him, so he couldn't let anyone see him. The unhappy fluffball scratched him through his inner garment. These attendants aren't even 100 years old, and this guy has the nerve to call them Gigi. Really has no shame. We're here on the Sanctum Master's orders to deliver some outfits. They set several trays which held 3 sets of fine black wide-sleeved robes on the table. Black. Mo Tianliao picked one up and frowned. Everyone in Wuqing Sanctum wore white. Why were they giving him black, which was the same color as Xuanji Zenren's robes? Wu Yun sect isn't particular about your attire, so you don't need to worry about it, one of the attendants explained. They all curtsied and left. Mo Tianliao thought about it. The first-generation disciples he'd seen at Wu Yun Grand Hall had indeed worn whatever they pleased in all colors of the rainbow. Perhaps the second-generation disciples of Wu Qing Sanctum wore white to please their master. The next day, Mo Tianliao dressed up in a black wide-sleeved robe topped with a sheer outer robe embroidered with silver cloud patterns. An obsidian dragon crown inlaid with silver completed the look, giving him the appearance of a distinguished gentleman. He hadn't been that striking in ordinary cotton clothes, but now dressed in this finery, his exceptionally handsome face really stood out. Oh, I forgot a scratch. 14. The little cat sitting on the bed glanced up at Mo Tianliao to find him finally becoming a little more pleasing to the eye. He sprang onto Mo Tianliao's shoulder and swished his tail. Let's go! Mo Tianliao put the cat back down on the bed. Be good. Play by yourself here. I'll be back this afternoon. The feast would be crowded, and he couldn't let anyone catch sight of Paw Paw. Displeased, the cat clawed at the bedsheet. Mo Tianliao walked out of the courtyard and found Su Wen waiting there, telling her, Let's go. Su Wen's eyes widened, and she gaped at the stunningly handsome elder before her. She only closed her mouth and got it together to stumble after him when he called out to her. Mini extra. Woodworker. Shixiang, this is a gift from my Shizun. Yanli, speechless. Disciple A. It must be a spiritual treasure that bewitches whoever hears it ring. Disciple B. It must be a key to a secret dungeon you open by ringing it. Sect leader. What a pretty bell. Come, dear disciple, wear it around your neck. Yanli, speechless. Poor Yanli. That's awesome. Oh, the sect leader. I hope he doesn't turn into a I'm not going to spoil it for anyone. I hope he's a good sect leader. I was about to reference a spoiler and then thought better of it. All right, one more chapter for tonight. Chapter 11, Gift. They crossed the arched bridge and arrived at Wutian Sanctum. The realm within was extremely spacious, several times bigger than Wuqing Sanctum, with magnificent structures throughout. Pavilions, towers, and mansions were interconnected by bridges and upturned eaves, and mountain mists swirled majestically around all of it. Dancing cranes completed the breathtaking sight. As soon as they stepped through, Yan Li's disciple came up to welcome them. The banquet is being held in the Windsurf Pavilion to the east. This way, please. Sword riding wasn't permitted in the 3 sanctums, so they had to walk, which saved Mo Tianliao, who couldn't fly yet, from losing face. The windsurf pavilion was a spacious open-air pavilion nestled among the flowers. A lot of long, low tables had been set up inside, and quite a few people had already taken their seats. At the front was a slightly raised stone platform, which was clearly meant for Yan Li. Yan Li was the eldest personal disciple of Tianlang Zhenren, the sect leader, and he held the highest status among all the first generation disciples. He was a genius with a fire element heaven attribute. Typically, grand celebrations weren't held for birthdays when the elders were still around, but Yan Li was well liked, and several of his fellow disciples had insisted on throwing him a banquet. He had recently succeeded in breaking through to the nascent soul stage, besides, and the sect leader had been so delighted that he had given his consent. The disciple directed Mo Tian Liao to the foremost jade table. Your seat is the first on the east side. Mo Tian Liao nodded and walked over. The silver patterns on his black silk robes were rather conspicuous in the sunlight, but the rest of his black outfit seemed to absorb all the light. He gave off an indescribably oppressive aura. The moment he entered, the lively hall fell silent. Ignoring their reaction, Mo Tian Liao made a beeline for a seat, lifted the hem of his robe and sat down. The no-fly zones in cultivation settings always amuse me. Like, what exactly is stopping cultivators from having sword races in towns? To answer your question, Truffle, probably just like propriety and not being shameless. So like, you know how seriously a lot of these sects take rules and courtesy. So it's probably a courtesy thing. Which is why when someone does, it's like, oh, that unruly cultivator. That's my take on it. Kinda like in Modao Zushi, like, you carry your sword because it's a respect thing. Okay. Xuanji Zenren's personal disciples had yet to arrive. Only the sect leader's personal disciples were present so far. Each one carried himself with dignity and composure. When they saw Mo Tianliao, they nodded in greeting. The hall livened up again, and the second-generation disciples, sitting in the back, began to whisper. I can't believe it's him. Who's that? He's so imposing. Haven't you heard? He's the personal disciple Qing Tong Zanren just took. Apparently, he was chosen because he's handsome. Mo Tian Liao poured himself a cup of wine from the jade teapot before him and took a sip. Sweet, aromatic, and rich in spiritual energy. This was an excellent wine. That's fair. Also, I imagine one encounter with clotheslines would be enough for many cultivators. Yeah. Yeah. Both for the shame and probably the pain. Mostly the shame. Su Wen sat at the table behind Mo Tian Liao and introduced the first generation disciples to him in hushed tones. The sect leader had 5 personal disciples. Besides Yan Li, 2 others were present today. Zimo, the baby-faced second disciple dressed in purple, and Bai Luo, the steely-looking third disciple dressed in white. Mo Xiang, his 4th disciple, is out training with my Shifu, Su Wen explained. And Lang Shi, the 5th disciple, is still young, so he doesn't participate in these banquets. Mo Tian Liao nodded slightly and looked at the 2 people sitting on either side of him. Yan Li was certainly well versed in etiquette. He'd given Mo Tian Liao the foremost seat, while his 2 juniors took the less honorary seats. This was a show of respect to Wu Qing's sanctum. The row of seats opposite him was clearly reserved for Xuanji's disciples. Zimo was Simo was seated beside him, and he seemed rather hyperactive. When he saw Mo Tianliao approach, he couldn't resist striking up a conversation. I'm Mo Tianlang's Zimo, so I think it's Simo? Yeah, I think it's Simo. Tenling Zenren's second disciple. You can call me Simo Shixiang or Shi Shixian. How may I address you? Greetings, Shixian. I'm Mo Tianliao. Mo Tianliao answered warmly. Then I'll call you Mo Shidi from now on. Zemo looked very happy. This is so much better. Don't ever take after your eldest Shixian. He's always so fierce. Mo Tianliao smiled and said nothing. Simo elbowed his junior, Tianlang Zenren's third disciple. Xiao Bai, say hello! Greetings, Bai Shixiang. Mo Tianliao cupped his hands in greeting. Bai Luo carefully put down his wine cup, looked over slowly, paused for a moment, and raised his hands in greeting. Greetings, I'm Bai Luo. Oh, Mo Tianliao was startled. Bai Luo had a soft, weak voice that was very much at odds with his dashing appearance. Sorry, let me try that again. Greetings, I'm Bai Luo. Here, let's toast to our first formal meeting today, since we didn't get to do it at the Grand Hall the last time. Simo topped up Mo Tianliao's cup, and Mo Tianliao reciprocated by refilling Simo and Bai Luo's cups as well. The trio toasted, instantly warming up the atmosphere. Of course, this warm atmosphere was basically just Simo chatting nonstop to Mo Tianliao, while Bai Luo quietly drank by himself and occasionally glanced over to listen to their conversation. As they chatted, Xuanji Zenren's disciples made a grand entrance. Xuanji Zenren had the most disciples, over 10, but only 3 were his personal disciples. The rest were just ordinary disciples. Of the 3 Sanctum Masters, Xuanji was the most fond of taking in disciples, but he had a mercurial temperament. Often he would happily accept them only to lose interest a couple of days later and relegate them to being ordinary disciples instead. The group walked over, led by a tall, slender man in a multicolored outfit. A long, dark green robe topped by a dark red outer robe and secured with a bright yellow belt. It was pretty, with delicate features. Hey, Hua Qing, not wearing that fancy butterflies among flowers dress today? Shimo shouted at him. The man promptly stumbled. Shut up, he hissed back through gritted teeth. It's not a dress. Where's Yuan Shixiang and Yu Shidi? Shimo turned to introduce the newcomers to Mo Tianliao. The one leading the group was Hua Qing, Xuanji Senren's second disciple and a flamboyant dresser, while those following behind him were forgettably ordinary disciples, or disciples without confirmed status. Yuan Shixian is in seclusion and Yu Shidi is out with Shifu. Hua Qing said, glaring at Shimo as he took the first seat on the right. The 2 tables beside him were empty, and neither Bai Luo or Shimo wanted to go over and sit with him. Hua Qing grabbed the younger disciple. Qing Shidi, come sit here. This was Xuanji Zenren's newest disciple, the one with a heaven attribute. His name was Cheng Shi, and his status was undetermined as yet. Cheng Shi politely demurred for a moment before accepting and taking his seat. Mo Tianliao withdrew his gaze and clinked cups with Simo and finished his wine. The youth was clearly getting a bit too big for his britches, sitting there as if he owned the place, unaware of the jealousy and mockery in the eyes of his seniors staring daggers from behind him. Just then, a clear voice rang out from nearby. Sorry to keep everyone waiting. Yan Li was dressed in red and gave off the overwhelming aura of a newly advanced nascent soul cultivator. He still had yet to learn to control it at will. He strode up to the host seat and smiled. Thank you, everyone, for gracing my birthday feast today with your presence. As a show of gratitude, I shall offer the first toast. He raised his cup and downed the wine in one gulp. His straightforward manner quickly won everyone over, and they raised their cups in response with words of congratulations. Mo Tianliao looked up at Yan Li. His mesmerizing eyes carried a hint of a smile, and the calm, unhurried way he spoke was truly pleasant to the ears. No wonder he was so well liked in Wu Yun's sect. Let's enjoy ourselves today, he said, beaming at the gathered crowd. We rarely get a chance to take a break from cultivating, so we should relax and get drunk. Attendants filed into the hall bearing spiritual fruits and dishes. Mo Tianliao looked at the feast before him. Even if a cultivator abstained from food, they could still eat for pleasure, meat and vegetables alike. But those from the Orthodox sects often only consume spiritual wine or spiritual fruits to keep up their ethereal, dignified image. A spread of steaming hot dishes like this was really rare. These drumsticks are delicious. Shall Bai try one? Shimo grinned at Bai Lu with the drumstick in his mouth. Bai Lu glared at him coldly and placed the plate of drumsticks before Mo Tianliao. Hey, give them to me if you're not eating. Why give them to him? Shimo protested, making a grab for the plate. Mo Tianliao picked up the plate. Bai Shixiang gave them to me. Shimo's eyes widened and he glared. Why, you little. Cheng Shi pursed his lips. Giving priority to the elders is a sect rule. Why, what is Mo Shidi doing, snatching food from Shixiang? He was supposed to be the gifted one, but he still had no status to his name. Meanwhile, that dual attribute guy could get into the sect with just his looks and get to be Ching Tong Zenren's disciple. Even worse, he was acting like he was on equal footing with the sect leader's disciples. The lively atmosphere came to an abrupt halt. Hua Qing rolled his eyes. This junior really can't read the room. Can't you see Mo Tian Liao is just joking around? Besides, Mo Tian Liao is a personal disciple, while your own status hasn't even been confirmed yet. What do you think you're doing, calling him Shidi? Yan Li stepped forward and broke the awkward silence. Mo Shidi, I'm so glad you could make it today. Here, let's drink. Don't hesitate to tell me if you ever encounter any difficulties in the sect. Mo Tianliao stood up. Thank you. Thank you, Shixiang. Let me toast you. After the toast, Mo Tianliao motioned for Su Wen to bring out Wu Qing's sanctum's gift, some spiritual stones and herbs. This is a little something from the disciples of our realm to wish you a happy birthday. Yan Li accepted them with a smile and passed them along to Qi Fang, his disciple, behind him. My Shizun can't come as he's in seclusion, so I brought along his gift and his congratulations for breaking through to the nascent soul stage. Mo Qian Liao presented an exquisite box. Its lid was open, revealing the beautifully wrought fist-sized bell within. The corner of Yenli's lips twitched almost imperceptibly at the sight of the bell. He quickly closed the lid and held it up in his hands as he bowed to the east. Thank you, Shishu, for the gift. Hua Qing had Cheng Shi present their master's gift too, a long box with its lid tightly closed. Cheng Shi saw that Mo Tianliao's box was open, with what he thought was clearly a rare spiritual treasure sparkling inside. So, wanting to make his own master look good too, he took it upon himself to open their box before handing it over to Yan Li. Mo Tianliao glanced over to see a fine piece of long hemp rope? Yep, just a big rope. And looking at it with the eyes of a master artificer, he could tell it was a genuine piece of hemp rope. It wouldn't even qualify as a magical artifact. Glaring at Cheng Shi, Hua Qing quickly shut the box and handed it over to Yan Li with a smile. Acting like he hadn't seen it, Yan Li respectfully accepted the box and bowed in gratitude toward the west. And so the banquet ended on a seemingly harmonious note. Mo Tianliao returned to Wu Qing's sanctum and went to see his master. But the attendants expressionlessly blocked his way. The sanctum master is currently meeting the sect leader. Well then, I'll come back later. Mo Tianliao returned to his courtyard. His cat was missing again, leaving behind only a bedsheet decorated with frayed threads and tiny holes lying pitifully on the bed. Frowning, Mo Tianliao considered all the furball's frequent haunts, then made his way to the back mountain. It's like string, only manlier. It feels a little ominous to be giving that, but I guess we'll see where that goes. Probably in the next stream. But for now, it's kind of feels like either a slap in the face or a ill omen to give someone a length of rope for their birthday. But I digress. Mini extra. Disciple A. That hemp rope must be some great treasure. Disciple B. Yeah, look at how sturdy that 1.5 mile long rope bridge is. Woodworker. Xuanji brand hemp rope. Quality guaranteed. Trusted by all. Yeah. So that is actually where we're going to end it for tonight. So I guess we will get to the party on Thursday. But thank you all so much for joining me tonight. I had fun with this. I was a little surprised that we just blatantly pretty much stated that, hey, one, Shizen's the cat, and two, Mo Tian Liao just blatantly admitted, yep, I'm kind of a different soul. Like, I'm here. I can't tell you exactly who I am, but like, yeah, I'm a little different. But yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's a party. Stuff always goes down at the parties. So it will definitely be an entertaining time. So yeah, make sure to be here Thursday. But yes, anyone who's watching later, I hope you enjoyed as well. I'm really enjoying this book. It's more lighthearted, I guess, than I didn't know what I was expecting with this one, but it's very lighthearted, and I hope it kind of keeps that because so many Danmei go so dark. And we deserve a little fluff now and again. But yes. Good night, everybody. I will see you in the next stream. Bye-bye.